The auditorium's lights dimmed as thousands of alien students settled into their three-tiered seating rings, eyes gleaming in anticipation. Today was the first live demonstration of the Omnistructure Integrity Simulator, a system designed to test how well students could reinforce virtual megastructures under stress. For the alien students, the challenge was daunting. For the humans in the exchange program, it was Tuesday. Tarek Morgan, compact, calm, and wearing an Earth engineering hoodie, sat at his console, waiting for instructions. He had already memorized the simulator's 800-page manual, mostly because it helped him sleep. Professor Yilmaz Vo, a gentle, many-limbed Sephron with a voice like carbonated honey, floated to the center platform. "Students," the professor began, "you may select any safe mode scenario for testing structural limits. No destructive sequences, please. This is merely an assessment." The class nodded. Tarek raised his hand. The entire room tensed. Humans rarely asked questions, but when they did, alien faculties had learned to brace themselves. Professor Yilmaz tried to smile. "Yes, Human Morgan?" Tarek cleared his throat. "Before I start, do you want the structure to fail through catastrophic rupture, controlled collapse, or cascading chain reaction failure? I need to know which failure curve we're using." Silence. Absolute. The kind of silence that makes a room feel evacuated. Dozens of alien species stared at him, horrified. Some flattening their ears, some pulling in their limbs, some rapidly changing color in distress. A few first years fainted immediately, slumping sideways in their learning harnesses. Professor Yilmaz's hollow tablet slipped from two of his hands. "Human Morgan," he whispered. "Why would you choose any of those?" Tarek blinked. "Because that's how structures fail? I mean, are we doing real engineering or just decoration?" A ripple of terror passed through the crowd. To Tarek, structural failure modes were normal. How else could you design anything safely? To the rest of the galaxy, catastrophic rupture was the kind of phrase only used in disaster documentaries that opened with the words, "The survivors still do not understand what happened." Professor Yilmaz steadied himself on trembling limbs. "Human Morgan, you study these events?" Tarek frowned. "Yeah. On Earth it's part of basic engineering training. You have to know how things break before you can build anything that doesn't." The professor's voice cracked. "You study the ways entire structures can annihilate themselves, as a baseline?" Tarek nodded, confused. Around him, alien students began discreetly backing away, as though proximity alone might trigger a collapse simulation. Somewhere deep beneath the university, the Emergency Engineering Council received an automatic alert. Flag level red. Human-initiated destructive physics inquiry. The galaxy was about to panic, and Tarek was just trying to follow instructions. The alert reached the Engineering Council in under 3 seconds. To alien species unaccustomed to human logic, that was 3 seconds too late. Layers of reinforced shielding opened like petals as the council chamber activated, glowing with holographic charts and risk assessments. Representatives of 12 species appeared in their seats. Some in person, some as shimmering projections, all wearing some form of distress coloration. High Engineer Lorenzeth, a crystalline being whose emotional state flickered visibly across her facets, reviewed the emergency transcript. Her glow dimmed to an ominous amber. "Read it again," she said. A junior analyst complied, voice strained. Human Morgan asked, "Do you want catastrophic rupture, controlled collapse, or cascading chain reaction failure?" He then clarified that these are standard engineering concepts on Earth. A shudder passed around the table. A reptilian delegate coiled tightly, scales rising in alarm. That human offered 3 different types of extinction events? Casually? It appears so. And he said this is basic? Correct. Half the room needed to hydrate. But while most delegates panicked, High Engineer Lorenzeth grew still, the way crystalline minds do when processing something deeply inconvenient. "We were warned," she said at last. "Humans come from a Class 5 environmental hazard world. Their structures regularly experience quakes, firestorms, atmospheric pressure shifts, hydrological assault. A tentacled delegate waved frantically. Yes, we know Earth is unreasonable, but this? This implies they train for structural disasters by intentionally creating catastrophic scenarios. The analyst cleared his throat. They do. Screams. Actual screams. Lorenzeth turned to the silent, flickering hologram of a human liaison. Is this true? The liaison shrugged. Look, humans don't want disasters. But we study failure the way chefs study knives. You can't use one safely unless you know exactly how it can hurt you. Half the council went pale. So, catastrophic rupture is a knife to you people? More like recipe variations. The screams began again. Lorenzeth dimmed to a worried violet. If even one human student carries destructive physics training equivalent to a planetary hazard specialist, then our educational infrastructure is not prepared. That was an understatement. Across the chamber, simulation models sprang to life. Probability curves, structural integrity charts, and worst-case projections. Every one of them ended in red spirals labeled Human-optimized failure mode, unknown parameters. The council reached the only logical conclusion. We need a full psychological and technical evaluation, Lorenzeth declared, before Human Morgan destabilizes the entire program, accidentally or otherwise. They transmitted the order immediately. Back in the auditorium, Tarek Morgan watched as medics tended to fainted students, and the professor tried very hard not to panic. Tarek scratched his head. Did I say something wrong? Tarek Morgan was halfway through packing his datapads when the door to the lecture hall slid open with a hiss that felt way too official for an engineering school. 3 council security officers entered, 2 insected, 1 avian, all looking like they expected to find a live antimatter charge waiting to go off. The avian one stepped forward. Human Morgan. You are requested. She glanced at her wrist display, feathers ruffling. No, strongly requested. No, that's not it, You are being immediately escorted to the Engineering Council for a precautionary assessment. Tarek blinked. Assessment for what? The 3 officers exchanged glances. Clearly, none wanted to be the one to say it. The avian swallowed. For catastrophe proclivities. Tarek laughed. They did not. Oh, he said, straightening. You're serious. He lifted his hands slowly, the universal sign for, I'm not holding anything explosive. Though the insectoid officers still leaned away slightly. It didn't help that humans had a reputation for inventing explosives out of household items and stubbornness. Look, Tarek said, following as they escorted him into the hallway. If this is about the structural failure thing, I wasn't recommending those. I was just asking which scenario the professor wanted us to model. The insectoid officer clicked nervously. Catastrophic rupture is not a scenario on my homeworld. It is an extinction-level nightmare taught to hatchlings to encourage seatbelt use. Tarek frowned. That's dark. You asked about 3 types of nightmare. Not nightmares. Failure modes. Please stop calling them modes. They continued down the corridor, passing wide-eyed students who pressed themselves against the walls as the human walked by under armed escort. It would have been flattering if it weren't so awkward. Tarek leaned toward the avian officer. So, what exactly is this assessment? It is a standard multi-species evaluation used for engineers flagged as high risk. High risk how? The avian cleared her throat. Typically reserved for individuals who have attempted to collapse a building, intentionally. Tarek sputtered. I've never collapsed anything. Technically. Technically? Well, there was the grain silo incident, but that was mostly gravity's fault. The insected officer made a distressed chirping noise. They reached the lift platform, wide, sterile, and humming with soft mag-field resonance. As it ascended toward the council's upper levels, Tarek caught a glimpse of himself reflected in the polished alloy. Human. Death world species. Apparently terrifying without meaning to be. He sighed. I swear, he muttered. I came here to avoid blowing anything up. The officers exchanged glances. The avian whispered, Stars help us. The lift chimed. The doors opened. And Tarek Morgan stepped into the council's assessment wing, a labyrinth of reinforced chambers, hazard warning sigils, and observation panels thicker than most vault doors. A receptionist, a gelatinous species in a hovering containment field, smiled nervously. Human Morgan? Welcome to, Evaluation Suite 3. Please refrain from demonstrating any structural weaknesses during your stay. Tarek pinched the bridge of his nose. This was going to be a long day. Evaluation Suite 3 looked less like a classroom and more like the kind of room where governments questioned anomalies that crawled out of rifts in space-time. Everything was reinforced: walls, ceiling, floor, even the furniture. The observation window alone was thick enough to survive a meteor strike. Tarek sat in a chair that was bolted to the floor. This did not feel encouraging. Across from him, the council's appointed evaluator arrived with a nervous flutter of wings. Dr. Yilvra was a soft-feathered avianoid whose posture suggested she was prepared to flee at any moment. She perched on her own seat, also bolted down, and activated a floating interface screen. Human Morgan, she began. We are here to assess your predisposition toward catastrophic structural failure events. Tarek groaned. I knew that phrasing was going to haunt me. Dr. Yilvra tapped her screen, which projected a holographic model of a simple building. For calibration, she said, please describe the most probable failure mode of this structure. Tarek squinted. Well, what's the environment? Dry? Humid? Does it get earthquakes? What are the load tolerances? Wind shear? Thermal variation? Soil composition? Age? Foundation depth? Any? She flinched with every question. Stop. Stop. She raised trembling wings. This is already too many variables. That was the basic list. Basic, she echoed faintly. Stars protect us. She switched the model to something else, a perfectly symmetrical, overbuilt cube. Fine. This structure. Ideal conditions. No external threats. Tarek nodded. Okay. Then the first failure mode would be internal, material fatigue over time. Microfractures propagating under thermal cycling. Probably along the lateral support beams unless you've used a composite with cross-grain stabilization. And even then, the observation window dimmed. He didn't hear anything through it, but Tarek was positive multiple people had just cried out. Dr. Yilvra cleared her throat. And how would you handle such a failure? Reinforce the beams. Redistribute load. Hardest part is catching it early enough. Microfractures are sneaky little jerks. Dr. Yilvra's feathers puffed in horror. You call structural degradation sneaky? Everything's sneaky until it kills someone. That's engineering. The lights flickered as the council increased security protocols. Dr. Yilvra took a long breath, her chest feathers rising and falling. Let us move on, she said, voice trembling. Please describe your academic background. Sure. High-stress infrastructure engineering. Disaster mitigation. Building things that don't fall over even when everything else does. And your planet teaches this to undergraduates? Tarek shrugged. We have to start somewhere. Through the window, a multi-species group of observers scrambled to update their risk models. One raised a sign that read, "Is this normal for humans?" Another held up a second sign. Why do they train like this? Tarek resisted the urge to wave. Dr. Yilvra cleared her throat again. Final question for now. In your own words, describe your relationship with structural collapse. Tarek paused, considering. I respect it, he said at last. The way you respect lightning or deep oceans. You study it. You predict it. You work around it. But you don't pretend it won't happen. Everything fails eventually. My job is to make sure that happens safely, not suddenly. Dr. Yilvra just stared at him. It was the longest silence in the room so far. Finally she whispered, barely audible. "Oh no. He's competent." The observation room erupted into chaos. Security scrambled. Analysts updated threat levels. A senior council member fainted directly onto a data pad. Tarek threw up his hands. What did I do this time? The chaos behind the observation window eventually settled into something that looked less like outright panic and more like structured panic. Charts appeared, probability curves updated, and at least one medic was distributing calming patches. Dr. Yilva took a moment to compose herself before addressing Tarek again. "Human Morgan," she said carefully. "The Council is now examining a troubling hypothesis." Tarek raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "That your species' unusual tolerance for catastrophic scenarios is not an anomaly." She tapped her tablet, projecting a series of galactic job registries. "In fact, it seems humans are disproportionately represented in hazardous engineering fields across multiple star systems." Tarek blinked. "We are?" She zoomed in on the data. "Hazardous terraforming operations, 43% human. Deep core structural mining, 52% human. Emergency reactor containment teams, 67% human. Last resort repair operations." A job title that really should have raised alarms, 78% human. Tarek leaned forward. "That can't be right. We're not that common. We checked. Humans make up less than 1% of the galactic workforce." She clasped her wings nervously. "And yet you make up more than half of all workers voluntarily entering high-risk structural, chemical, or thermal environments." Tarek squinted. "And what exactly is the troubling part?" Dr. Yilva spread her wings in a grand, despairing gesture. "It means you don't merely tolerate danger. You gravitate toward it." Behind the glass, a council member facepalmed so hard the impact echoed faintly. Dr. Yilva flipped through more files, her feathers puffing with each one. "One human built a bridge out of molten metal flows during a volcanic eruption." "Pretty cool," Tarek murmured. "Another stabilized a collapsing orbital ring using improvised thruster arrays and a cargo ship." "Huh. Wish I'd seen that." "And one," her voice cracked, "sealed the reactor breach using only carbon foam, adjustable wrenches, and what appears to be duct tape." Tarek sat up straighter. "Oh yeah, duct tape'll fix anything." The entire observation room recoiled at once. Dr. Yilva whispered, "By the stars." For a moment she simply stared at him with the sort of expression one normally reserved for creatures that had climbed out of myth and started rearranging the laws of physics while whistling. Then she collected herself, smoothed her feathers, and spoke in the tone of someone delivering deeply unwanted news. "The Council has concluded that humans are not just capable of catastrophic understanding. You are already serving as the galaxy's unofficial hazard specialists. Without telling anyone." Tarek blinked again. "We're doing what?" She rotated the display. "You are the galaxy's last line of defense," she said, voice breaking on the words. "The ones sent in when everything else has failed. The ones who volunteer for systems considered too unstable for civilized species." Behind the window, someone held up a sign reading, "Why did no one notice this earlier?" Another sign appeared. "We let them into our universities." Tarek rubbed the back of his neck. "I mean, we're not trying to take over anything. We just want things not to collapse." Dr. Yilva slumped forward, feathers drooping. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly the problem." Tarek frowned. "Why?" "Because," she sighed, defeated, "you do not merely prevent collapse, Human Morgan. You anticipate it. You study it. You weaponize your understanding of it. And you walk directly into danger with a smile, as though the universe didn't build collapse into its fabric." Tarek crossed his arms, annoyed. "We're not fearless. We're just accustomed. Big difference." The room fell quiet. Behind the window, the observers whispered among themselves, slowly realizing something far more terrifying. Humans weren't reckless. They were experienced. Dr. Yilva finally clicked off the projections. "We must continue," she said. "The Council needs deeper analysis before drafting a galaxy-wide education policy." Tarek exhaled. Great. Another policy change because a human asked a question out loud. Dr. Yilva activated a new assessment module, one specifically designed for species whose environmental conditions have shaped anomalous resilience. It had only ever been used for extremophile microbes. It was not meant for primates with engineering degrees. A dozen icons floated above the table, representing stress responses, risk tolerance, cognitive load, survival strategy, behavioral calibration. Each one pulsed softly, awaiting input. "Human Morgan," she began delicately. "I need to establish a baseline for what your species considers a normal environmental threat." "Sure," Tarek said. "Shoot." Dr. Yilva twitched. "Please do not use phrases associated with projectile weapons during psychological assessment." "Right. My bad. Go ahead." She tapped the first icon. The hologram shifted into the image of a burning building. "Is this a disaster scenario?" Tarek shrugged. "Depends." She froze. "On what? Is anyone inside?" "Let us assume no." "Oh. Then it's just a building on fire. Bad, but manageable." Dr. Yilva's feathers puffed in horror. The second icon lit up, showing a massive hurricane swirling over an ocean. "Disaster scenario?" "Again, depends. Evacuation plan? Storm category? Infrastructure?" "You can design around it." The observation window's audio dampeners hissed as several council members shouted in dismay. The third icon appeared, depicting a skyscraper buckling under stress, bending at an angle that would make most species faint. Dr. Yilva swallowed. "Disaster?" Tarek hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. That one's bad. Structures shouldn't bend like that." She sagged in relief. "Oh good," she whispered. "Something frightens you." "But," Tarek added casually, "still not the worst." Her relief died instantly. What could possibly be worse? He counted on his fingers. Bridge resonance collapse. Corrosive soil liquefaction. Offshore platform shear failure. Cryogenic line rupture. Pressure differential blowouts. Molten. "Stop!" She hammered the console. The icons vanished. Behind the glass, someone fainted into a pile of datapads. Another frantically scribbled. "Humans are fine with fire?" on a whiteboard. Dr. Yilva took a deep breath, then forced her feathers flat. "All right," she said. "We must try a different approach. Please describe how a human is typically introduced to structural failure awareness." Usually as kids?" She blinked. "Kids? Yeah. Earth isn't exactly gentle. Storms, quakes, bad wiring, falling trees, frozen pipes, heat expansion. You learn early how stuff can break." Dr. Yilva covered her face with both wings, whispering. "They're trained by their homeworld." "It's not training. It's life experience. That is worse." She regrouped, opened a new tab, and projected a list labeled Behavioral Red Flags, High-Risk Engineering Species. She began reading them aloud. "Fascination with structural stressors?" Tarek nodded. "Yep. Comfort discussing collapse scenarios?" "Uh-huh. Willingness to enter unstable environments?" "Part of the job. High adaptability under extreme threat?" "Earth, remember?" She stared at him, speechless. Slowly, she turned the datapad so he could read it. Every single item on the red flag list, 15 traits total, was marked as baseline human behavior. Tarek winced. "Okay, that looks bad out of context." "There is no context that would make this less alarming," Dr. Yilva whispered. Behind the glass, a council member wrote in huge letters. "Humans are not broken. They are worse. They are prepared." Dr. Yilva shut off the holograms. We need to escalate this, she said softly. This is beyond academic evaluation. The Council must determine if humanity requires special categorization. Tarek stiffened. Special how? She checked her notes. Classification 7B, species whose proficiency in disaster makes them functionally post-panic entities. That sounds insulting. It is not meant to be. It is meant to warn others. Warn them about what? She met his eyes. That humans walk calmly where other species see apocalypse. Tarek leaned back. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. He'd grown up in a world where natural disasters weren't rare, they were seasonal. The council members behind the observation window had stopped arguing. That was Tarek's first warning that something was about to go very, very wrong. When a room full of worried aliens suddenly went silent, one of two things was happening. Either everyone had agreed on a plan, or everyone had agreed on a fear. Dr. Yilva cleared her throat, feathers trembling despite her attempts at composure. Human Morgan, she began. The Council requests a practical demonstration of your decision-making process regarding structural failure. Tarek blinked. Demonstration? Like a model? No, she said, wincing the moment the word left her beak. Not a real structure. A simulation. A fully contained virtual environment. No danger. No physical consequences. She hesitated. We think. Tarek sighed and leaned forward. Okay. What kind of scenario? Dr. Yilva pressed a button, and the room's hollow projector lit up, forming a floating model between them, a generic multi-level facility standing on stabilizer pylons. It wasn't detailed enough to belong to any particular species, like the Council had intentionally made it bland to prevent accusations of bias. All right, Tarek said. What's wrong with it? Dr. Yilva flinched. That is what we hope you will tell us. He gave the model one slow, thoughtful look. Then he burst out laughing. Behind the glass, at least 3 council members jerked backward like they'd been shot. Tarek shook his head. Where do I even start? The stabilizers are too narrow for the load distribution. The support mesh is overtensioned. The thermal expansion pattern isn't compensating for vertical stress. And these crossbeams? He squinted. These are decorative, aren't they? You use decorative beams to brace a load-bearing floor? Dr. Yilva made a noise somewhere between a choking gasp and a prayer. I didn't design this, she cried. The Council generated it based on average structural norms across 12 species. Well, Tarek said, spreading his hands, that explains the problem. You averaged out structural design philosophies? That's not engineering. That's a group project gone wrong. The simulation flickered as the Council hurriedly added parameters. Human Morgan, Dr. Yilva said. Please describe the most likely failure mode, using gentle terminology. Tarek nodded. Sure. Gentle. He pointed at the lower pylons. These collapse first. Dr. Yilva winced. That sounded gentle. Then, he continued, the supported floors will shear downward in a staggered collapse, kind of like a slinky made of bad decisions. Dr. Yilva made a pained squeak. The upper floors. Tarek went on, warming to the topic. We'll try to compensate, but the lateral loads will rip the decorative crossbeams right off. Please stop saying decorative crossbeams, she begged. And then you'll get total progressive failure. Whole building goes down. Probably sideways. Behind the glass, one observer wrote frantically. Sideways collapse? Why is that worse? Another wrote. Why did he say that so calmly? Dr. Yilva pressed her wings to her face. I regret this demonstration so very deeply. Tarek frowned. You asked what would happen? No, she whispered. We asked what might happen. You described the entire end-of-life cycle of the structure. That's engineering. She shook her head slowly. That is prophecy. Tarek snorted. If prophecy worked like that, my student loans would have warned me. Behind the window, several council members whispered in terrified awe. He sees collapse before it exists. He predicts destruction like an oracle. No wonder humans survive anything. Someone scribbled. Is he a hazard engineer or a low-grade cosmic being? The simulation dissolved, and Dr. Yilvra sagged in relief. Human Morgan, she said weakly, your demonstration has confirmed our concerns. We must now consult the High Council regarding appropriate educational boundaries for your species. Tarek crossed his arms. Why? I didn't do anything. Dr. Yilvra met his gaze with exhausted sincerity. You didn't need to. You simply existed in the same room as a building. The High Council chamber was built to withstand political conflict, heated arguments, and occasional small-scale explosions. It was not built for a calm, mildly confused human waiting patiently in the center of the room. Tarek stood on a circular platform while 12 towering holograms of the High Counselors looked down at him. Every species represented was displaying some form of biological stress signal: flared gills, vibrating antennae, bioluminescent panic stripes, defensive feathering, and one counselor who kept involuntarily ejecting ink. None of this inspired confidence. Dr. Yilvra hovered at the edge of the platform, visibly preparing for disaster. Tarek, meanwhile, just wondered why the chamber had so many warning lights. He hadn't done anything yet. The central hologram brightened. High Counselor Vietren, a serpentine being of green-gold scales, addressed him. Human Morgan, the counselor said, you stand before the High Council under advisement of species-level hazard review. Tarek blinked. That sounds dramatic. It is not intended as a punishment, the counselor clarified. It is intended as a risk management process. Risk management of me? No. Your entire civilization. Behind the glass, analysts scrambled to adjust their models. Dr. Yilvra cleared her throat, stepping forward. High Counselors, I remind you that Human Morgan has been cooperative, calm, compliant, and, relatively speaking, non-destructive. Several counselors flinched at relatively. Vietren's voice dropped to a grave rumble. Human Morgan. Is it true that humans regularly design for catastrophic environmental interactions? Tarek thought about hurricanes flattening towns, earthquakes buckling highways, fires racing through forests, ocean storms slamming against coastal cities. Yeah, he admitted. Earth doesn't give us much choice. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Panic sense intensified. And is it also true, said Counselor Hilka, with trembling frills, that humans practice disaster response protocols from a young age? Sure. We've got drills for earthquakes, fires, tornadoes, floods, chemical leaks. Half the council fainted. The other half leaned back like he just described a black hole forming in his basement. Tarek held up his hands. Those are just basic safety drills. Not like we're fighting a kaiju every Tuesday. Dr. Yilvra tapped a message into her tablet. Note: human humor is not helping. Recommend banning jokes. Counselor Vietren rubbed his temples, scales shifting from green to a worried amber. Human Morgan, you have displayed remarkable comfort discussing collapse, catastrophe, and existential structural failure. Tarek frowned. Yeah, because denying those things gets people killed. The council stiffened. He continued, tone steady, earnest, unapologetically human. Everything breaks eventually. Buildings, machines, systems, people. Preparing for failure isn't doom and gloom, it's responsibility. You can't prevent collapse if you pretend it doesn't exist. Silence fell so heavy it felt like a physical weight. To humans, this was common sense. To the rest of the galaxy, this was the philosophy of a creature raised inside a war zone of natural forces. A counselor whispered, horrified. He respects destruction. Another added, he studies it. A third murmured, he anticipates entropy as if it were weather. Dr. Yilvra let out a soft, hopeless sigh. This is what I've been dealing with. she said. Tarek rubbed his forehead. I swear I'm not trying to scare anyone. Vietran lifted a hand. We understand, Human Morgan. The problem is not intent. It is existence. Thanks. We must determine whether humanity requires special designation within the Galactic Registry. He continued. Not due to aggression, but due to competence in catastrophe. Tarek stared. That's a thing? It is now. A murmur passed through the chamber, and the air filled with the rustle, hum, and clatter of species trying very hard to calm themselves. We will continue the evaluation shortly, Vietran said. But first, we require a recess. Every counselor vanished from their holographic podiums. Not to strategize. To breathe into stress bags. Dr. Yilvra looked at Tarek with resigned exhaustion. Congratulations, she said. You've broken the High Council. Tarek sighed. Again? The council reconvened 30 minutes later, though judging by the disheveled feathers, smudged luminescent markings, and one counselor who had clearly been crying ink, recovered, was a generous term. Tarek stood patiently on the center platform again. Dr. Yilvra stood beside him, muttering stress rituals under her breath. High Counselor Vietran materialized first. His scales had shifted to a color that, according to xenobiology guides, meant resignation mixed with dread. Human Morgan, he began. We will now proceed to the applied catastrophe reasoning demonstration. Tarek frowned. That sounds like something you should not let a student do. You are correct, Vietran agreed solemnly. And yet we find ourselves with no safer alternative than simply asking. The lights dimmed. The chamber floor shimmered. A holographic scenario rose from the center pad, a massive orbital habitat, complex and glittering, surrounded by hazard icons. Tarek's eyes widened. Oh, this is nice. Like a simulation packet. Half the council looked offended by how cheerful he sounded. Counselor Hilka, frills still trembling, spoke next. We request that you identify all possible collapse points in this orbital station. Please note, this is only a theoretical environment. We do not wish harm upon any of our real habitats. Tarek turned to Dr. Yilvra, whispering, Is this a trick? Or am I actually supposed to? You are supposed to answer carefully, she whispered back. And without causing them to hyperventilate. Tarek faced the simulation. He studied it. He folded his arms. He leaned forward slightly. He didn't mean to look predatory. Humans just did that when concentrating intensely. The chamber temperature dropped several degrees as fear pheromones spiked. Tarek began speaking slowly, methodically. Well, first issue, the load distribution on the outer ring isn't balanced. If one sector fails, the shear stress could propagate through the whole band. Counselor Farish choked on his own breath. Tarek continued oblivious. And the segment connectors? They're too rigid. If there's an impact or sudden torque shift, they'll transfer force directly instead of absorbing it. A different counselor fainted sideways out of their hologram field. Tarek pointed at the reactor housing. That's also a problem. The emergency coolant feeds are redundant, which is good, but they're all routed through one central manifold. If that goes, we understand. Vietran blurted, hands raised, panic stripes flaring. Tarek blinked. Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted a complete analysis. We do not want a complete analysis, the counselor said, voice trembling. We want to avoid mass psychological distress. The hologram flickered violently as a nervous technician behind the glass mashed the emergency stop button. The chamber returned to its neutral lighting. Counselors exhaled shakily. Counselor Hilka muttered. Catastrophe is his native language. Tarek scratched his cheek awkwardly. Look, I'm not trying to scare anyone. You asked what could go wrong, so I told you. That's just how we learn on Earth. Dr. Yilvra stepped forward, seizing the moment. High Counselors, what you are witnessing is not destructive intent. It is human preventative instinct. They analyze disasters because they come from a world that constantly produces them. Several counselors exchanged looks, fearful, but thoughtful. The HFY exhaled slowly. "Human Morgan," he said at last, "we must ask you one more question in this demonstration." Tarek straightened. "Okay." The HFY's gaze fixed on him, unwavering. "If everything failed, if every system broke down at once, what would you do?" Tarek didn't hesitate. The answer was muscle memory. It came from drills, from disasters survived, from generations of humans staring down entropy and refusing to bow. "I'd find the part that's not failing," he said quietly. "Anything at all. Something still holding together. And then I'd build everything else back out from that." The chamber fell silent. Not fearful this time. Stunned. Moved. Counselor Hilka whispered, "They rebuild from the ruins." Another murmured, "They grow from collapse." The HFY's scales shifted to a deep, contemplative gold. Dr. Yilvra's eyes softened with something like pride. And for the first time since this ordeal began, Tarek realized. He wasn't being evaluated because the galaxy feared humans would destroy it. He was being evaluated because humans were the only species that knew how to stand inside a catastrophe and still see a way out. When the doors opened again, the chamber lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, a calming wavelength for most species. Whether it would calm a human was questionable, but the council was clearly trying. Tarek stepped forward, wondering if the lack of dramatic fanfare meant things were finally settling. Dr. Yilvra stayed close beside him, posture tense in a way he recognized from professors back home who were trying to trust the system, while fully expecting it to explode. High Counselor Vietren adjusted a small console, and a hollow table rose between them. He spoke more gently now. "Human Morgan," he began, "there is a file we have hesitated to reveal to you." Tarek frowned. "Why? Is it about my exam? Did I fail something? Because if this is about the corrosion solvents question..." "It is not about your test," the HFY interrupted quickly. "It is about your species." The chamber quieted. A flicker of light. A document unfolded in the air, long, dense, and stamped with several high-security sigils Tarek didn't recognize. Dr. Yilvra inhaled sharply. "Counselor, are you certain?" "They deserve to know," the HFY said. Tarek leaned closer. The title alone made his stomach tighten. Provisional Assessment of Terran Catastrophe Adaptation Profiles. Classified, Galactic Ecosphere Security Office. He glanced at Dr. Yilvra. "You read this?" She looked away. "Yes." "And?" he asked. She sighed. "It was an awakening," the HFY continued. "This document was compiled during first contact, well before humans were approved to attend inter-species academies. It details why your kind was initially labeled a level black hazard entity." Tarek's eyes widened. "A hazard what?" "We're a species, not a nerve gas." "That is debatable," muttered Counselor Hilka. The HFY gestured to the hollow. It displayed a montage of Earth phenomena, annotated with alien notation. Megastorms, wildfires, hyperpredators, microbial arms races, tectonic instability, and, to Tarek's surprise, human cities rebuilt on ruins, families returning after disasters, communities forming in the aftermath of catastrophe. The HFY spoke softly. "You are a species that does not retreat from destruction. You move toward it. You stabilize it. You rebuild upon it even while the embers still burn." Counselor Farish added, "To most civilizations, survival is a rare, precious equilibrium. To humans, it is a process. One that continues even while everything else is collapsing." Tarek tried to swallow, but his throat felt tight. "I mean, isn't that normal? If something goes wrong, you fix it. Or improvise until you can." Counselor Hilka gave a shudder. "That sentence alone is why we needed an entire department to study you." The HFY highlighted a passage. "Terran cognitive patterns. natural inclination towards scenario analysis, including catastrophic edge cases. Not indicative of hostility. Indicative of adaptation. Dr. Yilvra stepped forward. This is what I tried to tell them earlier. Humans do not dwell on catastrophes because they wish to cause them. They dwell on catastrophes because your world forced you to master them. Tarek frowned. That sounds dramatic. It is accurate, B.A. Trent said firmly. Another page appeared. Terrestrial behavioral flag. When a human is calm while discussing disaster, assume competence, not intent. Hilcock cleared her throat. Your casual tone during the exam triggered a security alert. Tarek winced. Oh, yeah. I can see how that might have sounded bad. It sounded, Hilcock said carefully, as though you were choosing poison types with the same emotional inflection our species used to choose lunch spices. Tarek rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, okay. That's fair. V.A. Trent dimmed the file. But seeing you reasoning today, how you dissect disaster not to cause harm, but to prevent it, has changed our understanding. Tarek blinked. The Council changed its mind because I overanalyzed the simulation? Because you rebuilt it in your head, V.A. Trent corrected. While everyone else only saw its collapse. A silence settled over the chamber, heavier, but not with fear this time. With recognition. Respect. Possibility. Finally, V.A. Trent folded his hands. One last trial remains. A philosophical one. Tarek raised a brow. Philosophy? That's usually the part humans don't mess up. Dr. Yilvra groaned softly into her hands. Please do not say that out loud. V.A. Trent gestured toward the next door, which opened with a slow, echoing rumble. Human Morgan, he said. Let us see whether your species understands why it survived the impossible. Tarek stepped forward, and the chamber lights shifted to a deep, contemplative gold. Tarek stepped through the doorway, finding himself in a chamber that felt impossibly vast. The walls shimmered with holographic simulations of natural disasters, structural failures, and cosmic anomalies. Each scenario unfolded in real time, cascading into chaos as if the universe itself were testing him. The faint hum of gravitic dampeners filled the space, but it couldn't mask the tension in the air. A voice echoed from unseen speakers. Human Morgan, you are to navigate this chamber and stabilize all critical systems. No casualties. No failures beyond your intervention. Tarek blinked. So, a live-fire simulation? The holograms stiffened into tangible projections. Buildings bent, bridges twisted, orbital platforms groaned. Lava flows, hurricanes, and collapsing towers erupted simultaneously across the floor and walls. The Council's observers flinched. Some fainted. A few made incomprehensible shrieks that the chamber translated into alarms. Tarek crouched, scanning the chaos like an engineer on a routine drill. He traced load paths, recalculated stresses in milliseconds, and identified weak nodes in every structure. With steady hands, he began issuing stabilization commands, rerouting energy, reinforcing digital supports, and redistributing weight. Each intervention triggered cascading corrections throughout the holograms. The chamber pulsed with light and vibration as if acknowledging his mastery. One projection, a massive orbital habitat, began to tilt violently. Tarek didn't panic. He focused on a single critical joint still intact and leveraged it as an anchor, systematically recalculating torsion angles and damping oscillations. Slowly, impossibly, the habitat righted itself. He moved through the chamber like a conductor of chaos, calm in the eye of every storm. Behind him, the Council watched, pale and trembling. Every projection he stabilized was a testament to the human ability they feared and revered. Finally, Tarek paused, breathing shallowly. The chamber fell silent, the simulations frozen mid-cycle. He straightened and glanced at the exit. A single message projected in golden text above the doorway. You have not only survived. You have instructed the impossible. Dr. Yilvra appeared beside him, feathers slicked back with relief. I don't think anyone else could have done that without collapsing into panic, or literally collapsing, she murmured. Tarek shrugged. It's just problem solving. The Atren's voice resonated from the chamber walls. Human Morgan, the High Council has convened. Prepare for final assessment. You have demonstrated skill, calm, and insight beyond expectation. Your species is unlike any other. Tarek exhaled. He'd expected questions, evaluations, and panic, but not recognition. The council chamber was quieter than ever when Tarek returned. Every member still bore signs of near trauma, but their eyes carried something new, something closer to respect. Dr. Yilvra hovered at his side, whispering, "Brace yourself. This is ceremonial." The Atren's serpentine form uncoiled, scales flickering with subdued luminescence. Human Morgan, today you have illustrated why your species endures where others would falter. You do not merely react to collapse, you anticipate it. You learn from it. You rebuild. Tarek tilted his head. So we're special now? Hilka's frills twitched. Not special. Exceptional. Your baseline human behavior. Calm under catastrophe, analytical under stress, proactive under risk, is now classified as a model for universal hazard training. You have reset our understanding of preparedness. A hologram displayed diagrams of Earth cities, disaster drills, and response patterns, overlaid with probability curves of human reaction. The council murmured. They do not panic. They adapt. They persist. Tarek glanced at Dr. Yilvra. And this is a good thing? She smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. Yes. Because now, the galaxy will learn from you instead of fearing you. The Atren continued, voice steady. From this point forward, humans will be designated as standard bearers for catastrophe adaptation. Your species will be consulted before any high-risk project, any unstable environment, any interstellar hazard assessment. You are not invincible. You are prepared. Tarek leaned back. Prepared. Got it. That's manageable. Dr. Yilvra chuckled. By your standards, yes. By ours, terrifying. The chamber exhaled as one, the tension dissipating. Analysts returned to consoles, medics packed up, and holograms deactivated. Tarek looked around, realizing he was the calmest being in the room. The Atren inclined his head. Human Morgan, today you have not only survived the evaluation, you have demonstrated the standard by which all others will be measured. The galaxy now knows, when humans face collapse, they do not falter. They endure. They rebuild. They win. Tarek scratched his head, a small smile forming. So, basically, we're just doing what we always do. Notice problems, fix them, repeat. Hilka shuddered. They make it sound so mundane. The Atren scales gleamed gold. It is mundane to you. It is extraordinary to the rest of us. Tarek stepped toward the exit, shrugging again. Well, disasters don't wait, so neither do I. Dr. Yilvra sighed. And that, Human Morgan, is exactly why the galaxy survives with humans in it. The doors closed behind him. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly. Somewhere, a building bent, a bridge groaned, a storm raged. Somewhere else, humans were already figuring out how to make it hold. And Tarek Morgan? He was just getting started.